I'm Vin.
I'm Sori.
And this is a Refused Economy of Death.
The big homie Andreas.
The big homie Andreas. Economy of Death sounds like it's going to be a political song.
Yeah, definitely.
For timely topical political commentary, you can hit us up at Middle America with Vin and Sori. There are multiple ways to get your song reviewed. Let us know. My favorite is the community option. $1 at the gate gets you in at Patreon, where you will meet the amazing Ian of the Village. Mighty Ian. I haven't spoken to Ian in like 3 days. Are you still my buddy? Tell the truth. So you meet all these cool people, the amazing Lee of the Village, all the wonderful human beings that we talk about so often here. You'll actually get to meet them in persona. Well, in virtual persona anyway. And that being the case, you can pull your points together, and then that helps determine what song that we listen to. But if you're a filthy capitalist like Sori, and you don't want to do all that, 125 at the gates gets you straight in and above everybody. You hop, skip, and jump in front of everybody and get your song reviewed before everybody else. And that's what happened with, who is this?
Andreas.
Andreas. Let's go.
All right, ready?
I thought these guys were gonna be like punky.
Glass
Unbelievable. Hold on, I want to see what happens at the end.
Nothing. It just goes on forever.
They just have that hole in a loop.
Yeah, it just goes on forever. Okay, before you make this whole song probably like sad or like horrible, let me just say what it made me think of. So when I was like 15, I was 15 or 16, I was working at a grocery store and I had to bring the carts in, which is horrible to have to do in a Maine winter. Is there a reason you're playing that?
Yeah, there is. But go ahead.
So it's just horrible to do in a Maine winter. You're like pushing it through ice and snow and the carts are barely moving and it's just exhausting and frustrating, and like your hair is getting stuck to your head because you're sweating but you're cold and you're hot. It's just horrible. I just hated doing it.
It'd be interesting to see where this is going.
And there was a bumper sticker that I saw when I was doing this. I've actually shared it on the channel before, but who knows, it's been in what video. And it said like, keep working, many on welfare depend on you. But it was like, now I like agree with, even then I agreed with helping people who genuinely need help, but I also knew bunches of people that didn't need the help and they didn't want to work. And so they were on welfare because they didn't want to work. I was 16.
And you knew a bunch of people who were on welfare?
I actually knew quite a few that didn't need to be on it. Like they were
How
on.
could you possibly know that at 16 whether or not they needed to be on it?
Well, it was like people that were on like disability, but they would do like, all right, like maybe they would jump in on the volleyball game, but they couldn't do a job. You know what I mean?
How do you know the disability was
No,
physical?
because they would say it's just, I mean, I can't go into all the details of it, but I knew different people that were in that situation. So anyway.
But there weren't like a bunch of them.
Well, it seemed like a bunch to me because how many people did I actually know?
Okay.
You know, so it was a bunch to me. Anyway, Vin, can I just share my story without all of your interrogation?
Well, I mean...
Anyway.
I think that's a pretty important distinction, but go ahead.
So, anyway.
There's bunches of people on welfare that don't need it. Go ahead.
So anyway, so it was a really frustrating, like, bumper sticker to read in that situation because it was like I was just coming into the idea, not just coming into it, but basically, of how much taxes get taken out of your checks, especially when you're single. So, and my father was still claiming us on his taxes, so we couldn't even, like, claim there, you know what I mean? Like, it all went to the man, whether it was my dad or it was the state or it was the people that were taking over there. So it was like, and I'm pushing these carts and I was so extremely frustrated. So when the part of the song, where's the lyrics, babe? When the part of the song came up, it was just like, you're so fucked.
Yeah.
It just reminded me of like that moment because basically it sounds like they're talking about capitalism and how it affects people, and like there's the working class, and the working class is the class that's gonna die. Like your occupation becomes that you die for a living. Like that's it. And like when you feel like you're in that loop and it's just like there's like no escaping it. Like the friends that I knew that were on welfare but were trying to get off of it couldn't make enough money. If they made just enough money to like start being able to get somewhere, then the welfare, the benefits would get taken away, and then they would end up. It just like created such a big giant situation. So I don't know.
Yeah, we've got a friend that just had a baby, and she took leave, and then I saw her saying something about going back to work. So I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, do you want to work from home?" Because I was going to hook her up, and she said, "I'd love to be able to do that, but it's too much money, and I need my, wicker or whatever." So, like, she wants to, but she's got to have this, and this is like one of the things that kills me about the whole like pro-life thing. It's where like a girl like that, the dad abandoned them. She had the kid by herself.
Yeah.
There ought to be a bunch of financial incentives for that girl.
Yeah. Well,
they should tell her, work as many hours as you want, and we'll give you all these bennies and all the rest of it.
Honestly, WIC doesn't really provide like a whole lot of stuff, but if you can't nurse and then you have to go on formula, that's where it really helps because
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I remember with Selah, she had to go on Nutramigen, which was like the ultra sensitive. It smelled so disgusting. I couldn't believe I had to feed my baby that, but it was so unbelievably expensive.
Shout out to the Black Panthers for getting us WIC. Thanks, fellas.
But
you can just say that to somebody next time people try to compare the Black Panthers to the KKK. Unbelievable. More white people have benefited from the Black Panthers than black people, which is usually the way this stuff goes. But wait, anyway,
gosh.
We continue.
Terrible. Okay, so are you gonna make this sad? Is it a sad song?
What do you mean? Is it a sad song? I thought that
I don't know. Whenever it goes into politics and then it talks about the working class and capitalism and stuff, it usually comes down.
Politics
to something
is just the outward expression of a given zeitgeist. It's not really,
Was
So
it
it's-
at all funny to you
so-
when he said "you're so fucked"?
No, it wasn't funny to me.
Right. That's what I thought.
But I didn't think they intended it for it to be funny.
No, I don't think so either. But it was funny. It was a chuckle to me. Carry on.
Well, we had a pretty extended discussion on Middle America yesterday on the I should have just done a fireside, but it was like 1:30 in the morning or something like that, and I just figured nobody would want a fireside, so we were just having a closed conversation on Middle America about it. I'll probably download in a video and just put it up on the Middle America channel so you guys can watch it. But it was basically, it initially started about Kamala Harris and how horrible she's been for black people. And it was just me going back and forth with people on that, and the entire thing, like we said earlier about Trump, and probably in my mind, what I've said over and over again is the most brilliant psychological warfare campaign I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Which is to get the constituency of Democrats who, in my mind, are closer. A person who would vote Democrat, in my mind, is closer to my idea of what economic justice would be than a person who would vote Republican. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not attaching any moral aspect to any of that. I'm just saying, in my mind, economic justice, as I thought it through and as I've been exposed to Marx's ideology, would be something. So ultimately my philosophy is that we're going to come up with some new economic system down the road that's actually just. I do not believe that communism and Marxism are the
only solutions.
No, are the solution, period. I don't believe that communism or Marxism is the utopian solution, because I believe that Marx's grounding ideology, which is that history can be read through the lens of a battle between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. I think that initial assumption is wrong, because Marx does not attach that problem to sin. Mm-hmm. So if your diagnosis is wrong, the prescription is always going to be wrong, and you can die from a bad prescription, which is exactly what happened when Marxism was attempted to be applied in the 20th century. We got millions of dead bodies. So when people say, Vin, how could you say anything that Marx said is right when all these people died, yada, yada, yada? Well, Marx misdiagnosed the problem. The problem is human nature. It is not how much capital you have. Mm-hmm. Because if you put millions and millions and millions of dollars into the hand of a very generous individual, then him being part of the rich class is a good thing for his community. But when you put millions of dollars into the hands of an evil person, mm-hmm. then they're going to create a slave master class. Mm-hmm. And that is, in my mind, is a story of human history. So my issue with Marxism is that it's an economic system that does not account for human nature, which is why millions of people ended up dying. But capitalism is also an economic system that does not account for the sinfulness of human nature, which is why you have to add antitrust laws, right, where you can't have these monopolies and then the government comes in and breaks the monopolies. A lot of people don't know this. Pretty much everybody now believes that having a monopoly is bad and dangerous. But if you were back then during the antitrust period, it was the capitalists were saying, hey, you're violating the principles of laissez-faire capitalism, which is absolutely true. It's absolutely true that the government stepping in and initiating all these antitrust laws is absolutely a violation of laissez-faire capitalism. So is crony capitalism. People say, oh, that's not capitalism, that's crony capitalism. Sorry, you can't have the phrase crony capitalism without the term capitalism. So what happens is when you become an exorbitantly rich person and you realize that you actually have more capital than the people making the laws, you can then go and purchase those people who will then purchase. You know, this is the thing about Trump. Trump went out of his way and said, well, yeah, of course I dodged all that tax stuff. Of course. And then he ingeniously turned it around on Hillary and said, hey, you were in office when all those codes were written. Why didn't you do anything about it? It's because you knew that people like me could buy you off. He's right. He's right. He's right. So both economic systems end up with millions of people being dead. I think the capitalists have done a very, very good job. I think the capitalists have done a better job at brainwashing their constituency than the communists did. The communists were too naked with their authoritarianism. And the Marxists were too naked with their authoritarianism. Capitalists are much more advanced in foisting their authoritarianism onto the populace without the populace knowing it. So they were much more successful. And they were also better at fooling people into thinking that they were getting a piece of the pie when they really weren't. And they were also very good at making people angry at each other when those people are not the real problem. So for example, that bumper sticker is massively ironic, right? Because somebody made money off that bumper sticker. Right?
Yes.
So somebody paid money to a person so that they could have a bumper sticker to complain about people taking money from them. And that's how brilliant the capitalists are. The capitalists are playing 5D chess. The communists are still playing checkers, right? So capitalists have done a very, very good job at othering people who are in the slave class to make each other believe that they're the problem. Because you do realize that the vast majority of us are closer in class and economy to the poor class than we are to the rich class.
For sure.
But especially, and I said this in the Maynard thing, that Democrats were brainwashed by the DNC. Right-wingers are generally brainwashed by the capitalists to believe that everybody gets a fair shake and that they're doing great. Right? So the elite Republican class, capitalist Republican class, has brainwashed their constituency into believing that they're really in a land of opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that
they're doing great when they're really not.
I think in a capitalist environment, just like a strictly capitalist environment, you end up not realizing that there's a problem with the system because you just see it as a problem with the individual. Well, they're not working hard enough, or they're not, applying themselves and stuff like that. So it becomes, or about yourself.
Capitalists are brilliant at demonizing the victim. So that's why when you hear about Alex Smith, this 28-year-old kid who dies because he couldn't afford his insulin because he aged out, they blame him and they demonize him, and they're angry at this kid for dying. He should have had a better job or whatever. What's he doing, on his mother's insurance at 28 years old? Here's the thing. This video was brilliant. This is probably one of the most brilliant videos I've seen in a very, very long time. Because what do you have? You have two folks rolling dice in a barbershop, which a barbershop is one of those staples of capitalism where the regular guy can open up a little shop and he can make a little life for himself, and he can also create a community hub, which is what a barbershop is, right? And then who's playing dice? You have one guy who's very Western corporate looking, right? And then you have another guy who looks like one of the, General Mao or whatever, who's supposed to represent communist leadership. And these two fellas do not look like they're at war with each other.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So lyrically, this is a complete criticism, I think, of capitalism. If you could be unthinking and go, oh, he's criticizing capitalism. But visually, he's not just criticizing capitalism. What he's saying is both groups at the top, whether they be communist or capitalist, are hanging out in the community pool and they're playing dice. And you almost never see the actual dice in the camera. And the reason for that is the dice is the lives of the people that they're influencing.
I was just gonna say, I kept wondering if that's what it was.
Right? So the whole thing is just a dice game, and they're playing with the lives of these people. Both sides. And we're supposed to believe that these people hate each other and they're at war because they have completely different ideologies. And the video is saying, no, the people at the top, whether they're capitalist or communist, the people at the top are actually good friends because they're in power, they know they're in power, and as long as they can keep us at war with each other, they're going to remain in power. So they, on the outside, they'll demonize each other, but behind closed doors, they're not really mad at each other like that. It's just like with the NBA. You know, these people try to create storylines. Oh, these people hate each other. Blah, 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 blah. And then they'll argue on the court and things like that. And the minute the season's over, they're all vacationing together. It's good entertainment. You know, conflict creates is great. So the mastery of distraction that the people at the top have on both sides is something to behold. It really is something to behold. And so what I was talking about with Trump was simply the Democratic Party. And, you know, and if you were to, like, this is an East versus West, because it starts right from the beginning, right? But if you were to change this to a red and a blue, a Democrat and a Republican, the folks at the top are still doing this game. So here's what happened. Bernie Sanders was taken from us. We know that. That's just indisputable fact. In 2016, the DNC colluded with Hillary Clinton's team to freeze out Bernie and take the election from him. That's a fact. So did the media industrial complex, by the way.
It was obvious. It was obvious.
Correct. So they created that. They created that on purpose to get Bernie frozen out. Because they wanted to be able to say, we had the first black president, we have the first female president. But on top of that, Hillary Clinton is basic neoliberal nonsense. Not even neoliberal, just basic liberal nonsense that is basically just capitalism. Only we'll cut off this slice of the pie and give it to you. She's still capitalist, and she was very critical of Bernie Sanders' ideas. She was even critical of Obamacare. She was mocking Obama in the 2008 election race for Obamacare. So that was taken from us, and then she lost. She lost. So then for the next 3.5 years, the Democratic Party, in collusion with CNN and MSNBC, spun this ridiculous fake yarn about Trump, and they hyperbolized the demonic nature of Trump. And so instead of their constituency being mad as hell at them for, you know, people make fun of Cenk a lot, but Cenk's reaction during the election was appropriate when he said, we're at war, you guys are imbeciles, blah, 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 blah. That anger was appropriate because of what they did. Because I don't think there's any human being alive who believes that Bernie would have lost to Trump. Please understand, the people that voted for Barack Hussein Obama for 2 consecutive terms voted for Trump over and against Hillary. Okay? Those people would not have voted for Trump over Bernie. I'm sorry. So, what ended up happening was the DNC, along with the collusion of CNN and MSNBC, began to create this hyperbolized boogeyman of who Donald Trump was. And they started this crazy conspiracy theory with Russia. And then they started talking about how dangerous he was and comparing him to Hitler and calling him the biggest racist of all time and calling him the biggest misogynist of all time. Meanwhile, they were propping up William Jefferson Clinton, who had to settle out of court for actually sexually assaulting people. And we know about what happened with Biden. And Kamala Harris, his now vice president, said that she believed Biden's accuser, which means that Kamala Harris is running with with what she believes to be a sexual assaulter. So they created this entire crazy narrative about how horrific Donald Trump was, this caricature of who he is. And then is one thing, it was Russia, Russia, Russia. Then the Mueller report died, and then we went to the Zelensky call, and then that, and then, oh, let's do the impeachment. And the entire time, the entire constituency took the eye off the ball, which is how the hell could you do this to us because of Bernie Sanders? And we're no longer angry at the DNC for what they did to us. And Cenk and all those folks fell in line. Now it was Russia, Mueller, Zelensky, bribery, quid pro quo, blah 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 blah, impeach, blah 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 blah. And the entire time I was saying, and it wasn't just me, Jimmy Dore, a whole bunch of other people were saying, this is a distraction, this is a distraction. Who cares about his tweets? Who cares about his tweets? He told Ilhan Omar, if you think it's so good, go back to Somalia, fix Somalia, and come back over here. CNN went over crazy about that for five days. Then he went to, was it Baltimore? He said nobody wants to live there. It's cockroach infested, which is true, by the way. Nobody in the ghetto wants to live in the ghetto. Oh, please pick up a rap CD. Then you had the black guy on CNN crying, oh, I lived there. Yeah, you lived there, Negro. You lived there. Past tense. I hate when black people take part of this bullshit. You know good and well you didn't want to live there, bro. As soon as you got your money, you were out of there. So you just validated what Trump said. You silly person. But so we were distracted the entire time. And the entire time, the entire thing was Bernie was going to run again. And if he didn't win this time, he was gone. Because he's like 70 trillion years old. So Bernie runs again. And Bernie took part in the nonsense. Talking about Trump was the most dangerous president we've ever had. Okay? It's more dangerous than Bush. That got us into an $8 trillion war and got us which I'm about to give you a stat that's more expensive than $8 trillion. How can I interest you in 1 million dead civilians?
Jesus.
You don't have to be a Christian to know that that number is more expensive than the 8 trillion number, right? But Trump is the most dangerous president we ever had. Blah, he's the most racist president we've ever had, even though 91% of the beneficiaries of the First Step Act, which Trump passed, were black men. 91% of the beneficiaries of the First Step Act that Donald Trump passed, that Obama didn't pass in 8 years, was black men, right? So Bernie went along with this nonsense, and then what happened? What happened? Obama said specifically, I'm not going to let Bernie win. He said it during the primaries. You know what else he said during the primaries? He said, once he heard that Joe was running for president, you remember what Obama said? He put his hand on his back. What did he say to him? You don't have to do that, Joe.
You mean, Biden. Yeah.
You don't have to do that, Joe.
Bernie. Right.
You know what that means? Mr. Obama would not give anybody, wouldn't give Mr. Biden his endorsement, even though Biden was his vice for 8 years. Won the Medal of Freedom honor, which is basically equivalent to the Medal of Honor in the civilian world. He wouldn't endorse Biden. That's because he didn't believe in Biden. But what happened? What happened on Super Tuesday? Mr. Obama called up Buttigieg. He called up the little nice white lady from Minnesota, and they all quit at the same time and endorsed the big homie. And then Obama called up his folks in North Carolina and told the black guy to make everybody vote for Biden. And now we have Biden. So you know what happens? It's Biden versus Bernie. And there were specific states that said they wanted Medicare for all. But when it was time to vote between Bernie and Biden, what did they do? They voted for Biden. Why? Because why would they vote for a guy that explicitly has been against Medicare for all? Now, Kamala flipped on Medicare for all.
Right.
She liked it when it was popular, and then she flipped. Elizabeth Warren liked Medicare for all, and then she flipped. Biden never flipped on Medicare for all. He was always a hard no. Even during the pandemic, he refused to entertain Medicare for all. He said he'd veto it even if the Republicans wanted it. So how in the world could you have a state where Medicare for all is a very popular view, and yet when the Medicare for all candidate was against a non-Medicare for all candidate, they voted for the guy that was against them? Why? Because Trump was this nasty, horrible boogeyman, and they had been brainwashed for four years to believe that Trump was the second coming of the Antichrist. You see? So their fear of Trump outweighed their own well-being, and unfortunately for Bernie, he had nothing to argue with because you went along with the nonsense, Bernie. You went along with it. So now we have Biden. And no matter who wins, the capitalists are going to win again. So I said, look, the entire 3 or 4 years was about distracting you from what they did in 2016 and to get you to not focus on what was going to happen in 2020, check. But it's even bigger than that. Because here's the thing. Why in the world would a quadrillionaire worry about Medicare for all? You know, when these millionaires, they say, how are you going to pay for it? Let me tell you something. It is not going to significantly impact their life. The increases in taxes that would happen when we have Medicare for all isn't going to significantly impact their life. You know how I know that they're not concerned about their wallet when it comes to Medicare for all or any other social program? You know how I know? Because the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Niger, and the other places that we are all over the planet have cost us about $8 trillion. And they are the ones that are paying the bulk of that money. Right? It doesn't matter what system you're on. Generally speaking, at the tax bracket, these guys pay them. So they were willing to shell out $8 trillion for war. Why? Because war expands the American empire, and them being at the top of the food chain, they're going to benefit the most from the expansion of the American empire. But why would they then be against Medicare for all? Here's why. Because if you are, I told this story a couple videos ago. You show up and you're like, hey, I've got this $500 bill, so we're trying to get a house, and we're trying to, get credit, right? You gotta line up your credit, it's time to buy a house. So Sori shows up, she's like, hey, we got this $500 bill for whatever. I'm like, okay, pay it off, because I don't want it to hit your credit. Then you come back like 3 days later, and you're like, hey, there's this $1,000 bill. And I was like, what? And so we're going back and forth. Okay, fine, pay. Then there was this $1,100 bill. And Zoe got her eye lacerated. And
it wasn't $1,100.
Yeah, it was 11K. It came out to be $11,000 actually. 11,000 something dollars. And Zoe had this eye thing. I had insurance with another employer that I had, but because of the nature of the way that we do business, it was back and forth. I went back and forth with them for years. Whatever. So now it's $11,000. This is going to hit your credit, and you're trying to buy a house, right? So within 30 something whatever days, we shelled out $14,000 within like 2.5 weeks.
That was supposed to be our down payment.
That's part of the down payment, right? But we're able to draw and make that happen. The average American doesn't even have $1,000 in emergency funds.
They said most don't have $500 in emergency.
Emergency.
Yeah.
That's not an emergency. The average American dies over $15K in debt. So here's what happens. There's 28 million Americans in the same situation. So when you're an uninsured person, and the number one way of accumulating wealth and passing on multi-generational wealth is home ownership and land ownership. But here's the rub. If you have bad credit, you can't do that. So here's what happens. You end up with all this debt with college debt and medical debt, and you can't pay it, and that hits your credit. You are working as a slave to your debtors, and your entire life becomes about paying off a debt, and then you are not focused on creating generational wealth for your family. And that is the real reason that the Republican elites and the Democrat elites do not want Medicare for all. It is not because they're worried about their taxes. Here's what they're worried about. Rich people, and it was funny because I'd just been talking to a multimillionaire a couple hours previous. The guy's literally a multimillionaire, and we were having this discussion, and we were talking about plans for the next year or whatever. Let me tell you something about rich people. Rich people I'm talking about like rich people. They almost never think about themselves. They're always thinking empire, and they're always thinking clan. They're always thinking about second and third, fourth generation beyond me, right? Because they've got this sort of maniacal obsession with their name and their pedigree and all this, and so they want that to continue on into perpetuity, okay? So when you hear these people going against Medicare, all these rich white dudes who are going to die in 10 to 15 years, and they're talking about, oh, why are you going to pay for Medicare for all, blah, blah, blah. Man, they're not worried about their taxes. What they're worried about is, if you are able to work and save up money so that you can buy your own property and land, that means that your kids are not necessarily going to be slaves of their kids. So if you are constantly working, and he said it right there, your occupation's that you die for a living. So your kids are going to be in debt just like you. You're probably, statistically speaking, going to die $15K in debt, which means your entire life has been subsumed with paying off debt. That also means even if you, quote, bought a home, you're not going to be able to pay off that home. So that home goes back to the bank, or you give it to your kids. That's fine. They're going to have to continue to pay off your home debt if they want it, and then they're going to have to deal with their college debt and all the rest of it. So that way you have a permanent slave class, and their kids are in the permanent master class. That's the end game for both of these people.
My grandfather worked super, super hard all of his life and saved every bit of it that he could and did what he could to like prepare for my grandmother, that she would be able to have what she needed or whatever. And he actually did a wicked good job considering what he had for a job. Like, it was amazing. She didn't have to work and stuff after he passed away. But the money that she had, she ended up having to go to a nursing home at the end of her life because of the complications with her health. And they like took all the rest of the money that she had. She had nothing. It was so sad because she was like starting to get Alzheimer's, and she kept thinking that she had money, and she didn't have any money anymore. And like after she died, like every little bit of everything that she had that wasn't in cash, they took all of it. There was nothing left to pass to the kids, which is what he worked so hard for, was to pass that money to the kids. But it went to...
That's how these people think.
And I don't even think the care that she was getting was that great.
That's how these people think.
Yeah.
That's how they operate. And that's how they stay rich, and that's how their kids stay rich.
Yeah.
And that's how it works. And once you attain to a certain degree of capital, you get, you don't have to believe in a secret society. You just understand that, there's very few of us who are going to be quote unquote millionaires. And so when you're in that little group, then they all talk to each other and they create cabals so that they and their kids can continue to dominate, because they understand that the current economic system only works for them if there's a permanent slave underclass. They know that. But that's not because the money's doing that to them, Mr. Marx. It's because they're sinners. That's the reason. That's why when you had Animal Farm, you had the famous line, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others, right? So that's really the end game of the Democratic Party in this the entire Trump, Russia, blah, blah, all of that bullshit, all of that weeping and gnashing. Jimmy Dore talked to us about this. He was like, oh, really? They're really against Pelosi's at war with Trump. Really, Pelosi's at war with Trump. Then why the hell did she vote for Trump to have all this money released for the defense budget, for war? Sure, Pelosi's, Trump is the most dangerous, maniacal. What was that? You want multi-billion dollars for war? Sure, Mr. Trump, have it. Does that make sense to you? I think it's more rational to say that Nancy Pelosi is part of the rich class, and that the Democrats' obvious strategy was to demonize Trump, and the right-wing strategy is to demonize poor people. Demonize poor people and blame and have the Republicans blame poor people and people of color for all the problems, and they're the reason why you're under the boot. And capitalism has raised more people out of poverty than any other economic system, right? And so the reason that these people are poor is because they suck as human beings, and implicitly the reason that you're poor is because you also suck as a human being. There's a certain self-hatred that many poor right-wingers have. And then on the left side of it, they just channeled, they took identity politics, and they had the perfect alpha white Christian straight billionaire privileged male to say, this guy is the symbology of everything that's wrong with you. And both sides have successfully played that dice game, and people to this moment still fall for it. That's why if I criticize Trump, people automatically think that I'm pro-Biden, and the minute I criticize Biden, people think I'm pro-Trump. Because this is a dice game, and they've only given you two options.
Yeah.
See how that works? And as long as we keep playing that game, you're going to be in a permanent slave underclass. Period. End of story. So the video was extremely, that was one of the smartest videos I've seen in a very, very long time. Because these people are playing games with lives, and they've done it so much that they're bored.
Yeah.
These guys are bored.
Yeah, he did look.
They're bored. A lot of these rich people are bored. Sometimes I think they start these wars just for entertainment. Yeah, I got a little short story in my head.
Well, that's
a short story.
A crazy
in my head.
thought,
but maybe I'll write it. Maybe I'll write it. I wish I could like split myself into 9 people.
I wish you could too.
It'd be so fun.
I'd force one of you to stay with me all the time and not work. Just follow me around. Help me with this. What?
Well, it's interesting
we cook
because
together.
It's interesting though because like we grind a lot. We work very, very hard. You know, I was sending emails out, 3:30, 4 o'clock last night. You were looking at me. You're like, you look wide awake.
I could not believe it. Looked like it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm like, how is this happening?
So we work very, very, very hard. But I'm working for. Well, first I told them I'm working for the girls, so they're never ever going to be in a situation where they're financially dependent on me ever. And I'm working on building up businesses for the boys so that they never have to work for white people. And you got to start thinking generationally because that's how these people think. And whenever you make a political decision, you have to think.
I don't know. The
strategic.
Stories I've been hearing, it's not that great working for black people either. If you're black.
It's true. It's true. It's very true. I agree. So you shouldn't work for anybody. But, most of us aren't in these situations. Like people go, oh, you earn it, you grind it. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that I didn't earn though. I didn't earn the upbringing I had that put a primer on a work ethic. I didn't earn my intelligence. I didn't earn any of that.
That's what I was gonna say.
I didn't earn even the motor that I have inside. I didn't earn that. That was just something I was born with. So,
Yeah.
So anyway, went a little long. There's probably 2 people left, but there you go. I thoroughly enjoyed the song. It's a 10. I thought there was a lot of nuance lyrically that was explained in the video, and inshallah, if they're good comrades, they won't block the video so that you guys can see it because it's really important. You should PIP that in the throughout the video. Just let that thing play over and over again. The dice game. I give it a 10. I love the song. I love the video. It was great. What do you give it?
9.7.
There you are, dear listener. Vin out.
Sori out.
Gone.